The Fall of Bucky. Chapter 11. The Echo of Kindness. The fortress of Blackstone was silent at night. Only the wind moved through its halls, carrying with it whispers of the countless lives that had been broken in its shadow. Bucky sat alone in his chamber. No crown adorned his head, no riches cluttered the room. Instead, on the table before him lay a small broken toy, a wooden horse with one wheel missing. He had carried it since his childhood in Hollowbrook. Once he had promised to fix it for a little girl who cried when it broke. He never did. Now the paint was chipped, the wood splintered. It had survived battles, fires, and years of blood. And yet it remained intact, fragile, stubborn, enduring. Much like the boy he used to be. Bucky picked it up, turning it in his hand. For the first time in years, his grip trembled. "Why do I keep you?" he whispered. But the toy gave no answer. The memory of Hollowbrook returned unbidden. The laughter of children, the warmth of his mother's hand, the dream of fixing what was broken. Back then, he had been a boy of love, of principle, and now he was a tyrant draped in shadows. A knock came at the door. His General Kale entered, bowing deeply. "My lord, there is unrest in the western province. The villagers refuse to pay tribute. Shall we make an example?" Bucky placed the toy gently back on the table, his expression hardening. "Yes," he said, "burn their leaders alive. Let their screams remind the world what defiance costs." Kyle bowed and left without a word. Alone again, Bucky's eyes drifted back to the toy. His chest ached, a dull pain he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was the ghost of the boy who still lived somewhere deep inside him, clawing to be remembered. But the tyrant smothered the echo as he always did. Still, the toy remained. And though Bucky ruled with fear somewhere in the darkness of his heart, a faint echo of kindness endured. Silent, but unbroken. The Fall of Bucky. Chapter 12. The First Rebellion. Whispers of discontent spread across the empire like sparks in dry grass. For years, people had lived under the shadow of Bucky's flame and iron sigil. They obeyed out of fear, bent their knees because they had no choice. But fear, though powerful, was never eternal. And in the western province, the same province Bucky had ordered punished, the whispers grew into voices. It began with a single man, a farmer named Rylan, who had once been a boy in Hollowbrook like Bucky. He remembered the child who fixed toys, who stood up to bullies, who dreamed of a better world. That memory clashed with the tyrant the world now feared. Rylan refused to pay tribute, he refused to bow. And when soldiers came to drag him away, the villagers fought back. That night, a banner rose over the western hills. Not Bucky's black flame, but a white star, symbol of hope reborn. News reached the fortress swiftly. General Kale entered Bucky's war chamber, grim-faced. "My lord," he said, bowing low, "the western province has declared open rebellion. They rally under a star." Bucky stood at the great stone map of his empire, staring at the flickering candlelight that threw shadows across its borders. His jaw tightened. "A star," he repeated slowly. "How poetic. They think hope will save them." Kale hesitated. "Shall I send an army to crush them?" Bucky turned, his eyes glinting cold. "No, I will go myself." Gasps rippled through the council. The Shadow King had not ridden to war in years. His presence alone had become myth. To see him march at the head of his armies would shake the world. When Bucky arrived at the western hills, his soldiers clad in black iron behind him, the rebels were waiting. They were farmers, villagers, hunters, nothing more. Yet their eyes burned with something his own followers had long since lost: belief. At their front stood Rylan, holding high the star banner. "Bucky!" he shouted across the field. "Do you remember who you were? Do you remember Hollowbrook? You were one of us." For the first time in years, Bucky faltered. The name of his village was a blade twisting in his chest. But then the tyrant's mask returned. He raised his hand and the air seemed to still. "I am not Bucky," he said, his voice carrying like thunder. "I am the end of weakness. I am the order this world needs." His army roared as one. The ground shook as they advanced. And thus began the first true rebellion against the man the world no longer called Bucky, but only whispered as the greatest villain alive. The Fall of Bucky, Chapter 13, The Battle of the Star. The dawn rose blood-red over the western hills. Mist clung to the grass, hiding the movements of men, but the banners above told the story clearly. The white star against the black flame. Two worlds, two truths colliding. The rebels were poorly armed, farmers wielding scythes, hunters clutching bows, smiths carrying hammers. But they had fire in their hearts, and that fire was enough to bring them to the battlefield. Across the field, Bucky's soldiers stood in perfect formation, shields gleaming, blades ready. They were trained, disciplined, merciless. The ground itself seemed to tremble beneath their boots. At the center of it all, astride a black warhorse, was Bucky. Cloaked in iron, his presence alone silenced even the cries of the rebels. His eyes swept across the field and locked on the man who held the star banner, Rylan. The rebel leader raised his voice so all could hear. "Look at him, he was one of us. A boy who believed in kindness. He is not a god, not a shadow, he bleeds as we bleed." A murmur of courage spread through the rebel ranks. Bucky's reply was cold, sharp as a blade. "You speak of a boy long dead. If you stand for him, you stand for weakness. And weakness must be cut away." With a single motion of his hand, the battle began. The clash was brutal. Rebel arrows rained down, but Bucky's shield walls held firm. The rebels charged, and the Empire's soldiers answered with steel. The cries of men and the clash of iron filled the air. Rylan fought at the front, his banner held high even as arrows cut into his comrades. His defiance was a beacon, pulling men back to their feet when fear threatened to break them. Then through the chaos, Bucky himself dismounted. Sword in hand, he strode toward the rebel leader. The battlefield seemed to pause, as if the world itself held its breath. "Face me, Hollowbrook boy," Rylan shouted, his voice hoarse but unbroken. "Not as a king, not as a tyrant, face me as Bucky." Something in that name pierced through the tyrant's armor of pride. For a heartbeat, the boy flickered in his eyes, but then the shadow swallowed it whole. Their blades met with a crash that echoed across the valley. Sparks flew. Rylan fought with desperation, striking as if each swing carried the weight of every farmer, every child, every forgotten soul who still believed in hope. Bucky fought with precision, cold and unyielding, his every move sharpened by years of conquest. Steel rang against steel, blood stained the earth, and as the world watched, the greatest villain alive dueled the last man daring enough to call him by the name he had buried. The Fall of Bucky. Chapter 14. Duel of Shadows. Steel clashed again and again, each strike echoing through the valley like thunder. Around them the battle raged, shouts, screams, and the roar of war. But for Bucky and Rylan, the world narrowed to the space between their blades. Rylan's breath came ragged, his arms heavy, yet he pressed forward with the desperation of a man who had nothing to lose. His star banner, torn and bloodstained, still fluttered from his back. "Do you feel it, Bucky?" Rylan gasped as their swords locked, faces inches apart. "The boy you once were, he's still in there, he's watching you." For the first time in years, Bucky's jaw clenched with something other than cold command. His muscles strained as he shoved Rylan back, his voice a low growl. "That boy was weak, I killed him. I buried him beneath every crown I've broken." Rylan staggered but did not fall. He raised his blade again, defiance burning in his eyes. "No, you buried him, but you couldn't kill him. That's why you kept it." Bucky froze for half a heartbeat, a flicker of shock breaking through his mask. The toy, the broken wooden horse that sat on his table, untouched but never discarded. Rylan's strike came swift. Bucky barely deflected it, sparks flying as steel screamed against steel. "You kept it," Rylan shouted, pressing forward with renewed fury. "Because deep down you knew he was still alive." The words tore at Bucky's chest more deeply than any blade. Rage, guilt, memory, they all surged within him. His sword moved faster, his strikes heavier, until Rylan's defenses began to falter. At last, with a crushing blow, Bucky shattered Rylan's sword. The rebel leader fell to his knees, chest heaving, blood running from his temple. The battlefield fell silent. Rebels and soldiers alike watched, waiting. Bucky raised his blade, the tip hovering over Rylan's heart. His hand trembled, not with weakness, but with war inside himself. Rylan looked up, defiant even in defeat. "If you kill me, Bucky, the boy dies forever. If you spare me, maybe the world still has hope." For the briefest moment, silence stretched. The weight of choice bore down heavier than any crown, any army, any empire. The boy within him screamed to stop. The tyrant whispered to strike. And as the blade descended, the world braced to see which one would win. The Fall of Bucky. Chapter 15. Blood or Mercy. The battlefield held its breath. Bucky's blade hovered over Rylan's chest, gleaming in the cold light of dawn. His soldiers stood rigid, waiting for the order to slaughter. The rebels, bloodied and broken, clung to the faint hope that the boy inside the tyrant still breathed. Rylan met his gaze, unflinching. Do it, he said, his voice steady despite his wounds. Kill me and prove to the world what you've become. Or let me live and prove to yourself that you are not beyond saving. The words pierced deeper than steel. For a moment, the world shifted. Bucky was no longer on a battlefield. He was back in Hollowbrook, a boy with dirt-stained hands and a heart too big for his small body. He heard laughter, he felt warmth. He remembered love, his grip trembled. The blade wavered, but then came the voices of his empire. Echoes of every general, every soldier, every frightened subject who whispered his name like a curse. The Shadow King, the tyrant, the villain. If he faltered now, would the world see it as mercy or weakness? Bucky's jaw clenched, his eyes hardened. With a roar, he drove the blade downward. The rebels screamed, soldiers raised their weapons. The clash of steel threatened to begin anew. But when the dust cleared, the truth was revealed. Bucky's sword was buried deep in the earth beside Ryland's chest. The soil split, but the man lived. Gasps rippled through both armies. The Shadow King had spared his enemy. Bucky leaned close, his voice a whisper only Ryland could hear. You mistake mercy for forgiveness. I spared you not because I am weak, but because I want you alive to see the world I will build. You will carry the weight of your failure until your dying breath. He rose, his voice booming across the field. This rebellion is over. Those who bow may live. Those who resist will burn. Fear crashed through the rebels like a wave. Many dropped their weapons, some fled. The rebellion shattered, not by slaughter, but by the terrifying mercy of the man they thought incapable of it. Bucky turned his back and mounted his horse. His soldiers followed. The black flame rose higher than ever. But as he rode away, his eyes flicked once, just once, toward the broken man clutching the star banner. The boy inside him stirred. And for the first time in years, Bucky felt something dangerous, doubt.